Watchtower.
Well, breaking now in the investigation into that deadly Berlin terror attack and an international manhunt for the Tunisian prime suspect after his fingerprints were found on the truck used in that deadly rampage. Our next guest wrote a piece in the New York Daily News called "The Berlin Christmas Market Attack and the Likely Political Backlash," where he addressed German Chancellor Angela Merkel's open-door immigration policies, writing this: "Good intentions are not in and of themselves sufficient in politics, especially in perilous times such as these." Joining us now, James Kirchick, fellow with the Foreign Policy Initiative and correspondent at the Daily Beast. And we should note, James, your work actually took you to Europe for many years. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I used to live in Berlin, and I can tell you these Christmas markets are a real integral part of German culture. There's about 2,500 of them across the country, 60 in Berlin alone. There's something that every German, spends at least a day or two going to, and they're very symbolic, which is, I think, why they were attacked. And I can tell you that for months, people had been quietly suspecting, and there have been murmurs that the Christmas markets would be sort of the perfect target for a Islamist terrorist attack.
That's so chilling to hear.
Yeah.
Did anything get done in light of those murmurs to protect the people?
I don't think there was any real heightened security. I mean, there may have been some extra police officers and whatnot, but at the end of the day, unless you want to live in a police state, you're never really going to be able to prevent these.
It's interesting, and Greg Palcott was speaking with a person that was walking through the market, and he shared this report at the top of our show, and that person was talking about German values. And that really calls into what you were talking about in your piece, and good intentions. There's good intentions for the values that you want to represent as a country, but there's also the practicality of policy.
Yeah.
How do you think this might be at odds in Germany, and what do you think that teaches us?
I think anyone can understand what the motives were behind Chancellor Merkel's policy last year. Given Germany's history, they're very conscious of that in the Nazi period, and they really wanted to be sort of global humanitarians and showing an example to these suffering people. And Chancellor Merkel, she grew up in East Germany under a communist regime behind the Berlin Wall, so she knows, she really cherishes freedom. But at the same time, I think they just sort of underestimated the challenge that would be involved in welcoming over 1 million people from a completely different culture, most of them young men, into their country. And so now we're seeing a real fierce debate over what the future of the migrant policy will be.
And we should note, Germany is a country of 80 million people, 80 million plus. You have 1 million refugees coming in. As we take a look at the end of this year, we have to take this story into context of what has happened over the past year. And one of the big stories around the holidays last year, as you note in your piece, was what happened New Year's Eve in Germany. Tell us a little bit about that, remind our viewers about that, and what do you think that shows us about whether or not some changes have actually been made?
Yeah, last year in Cologne, there was sort of a mass sex assault against women on New Year's Eve outside the train station. About 2,000 women, or maybe it was 1,000 women, between 1,000 and 2,000 women were reporting sexual assaults by migrants. And then a year later, we have this incident. And so we're seeing now the rise of a far right in Germany, politically, which has not happened in this country since the end of World War II. We've seen it in other countries, in France and Austria, you have far-right parties that have been pretty popular for decades. But Germany had always been able to really avoid that. There had been no party to the right of the Christian Democrats. And now we're seeing this new party called Alternative for Germany. And just in the last 3 years, they've basically gone from 0 to 15%. And they may be the third biggest party in the German parliament.
It's interesting, as you're talking about Germany and obviously some of the political changes, there are those that use that term alt-right here at home.
No.
And of course, part of America is, we have a very strong tie to immigrants.
Right.
Look back in the number of American families that can trace their lineage to Ellis Island, for example. It's incredible. So as we take what happened in Germany and obviously cover it extensively, how do you think that applies to us here at home? We have a new president coming in, potentially new policies. What does it teach us? What should we learn from it?
I think America should really value its immigrant history, and I think it's what makes us special and different, is that we are a country of immigrants. And we've always assimilated immigrants better than most other places in the world, certainly Europe. And I think, migration is now a real big, important global topic. But I actually think that Americans have just dealt with this issue much better. We don't have big, sprawling ghettos filled with a Muslim underclass like they do in several European countries. I mean, I think our Muslim immigrants to the United States have integrated pretty well. And I would say the same for our Hispanic immigrants from Latin America. So I think we should really take pride in our traditions.
And that's an interesting difference to note. You have a new book coming out in the new year. I noticed that. Tell us a little bit about that, because you're taking a look at Europe in general, the health of Europe, and where you see it heading.
It's called The End of Europe. It's not the most optimistic of titles, but I try to be optimistic because I ultimately think that Europe should be the focus of American foreign policy. I think after the Cold War, we sort of thought, we've settled this, we've won, let's move on to Asia, Middle East. But you can tell the stories of the past couple of years in Europe now, from the Russians in Ukraine, from Brexit to the Greek fiscal crisis, to the migrant issue, to Islamic terrorism, to anti-Semitism. The sort of old, nasty traditions that Europeans have fought for hundreds of years are really rearing back with an ugly force, and we need to confront it.
I hear what you're saying. A strong, free Europe is important for a strong, free
Absolutely,
America.
absolutely.
We look forward to talking to you about that book coming out. It's going to be a big year. By the way, happy birthday,
Thank you
James.
so much.
It's a special day for James. Not only does he get to come on set, which we appreciate, but he's celebrating your birthday.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. John?